try not to disappoint you, but just as a ground rule, I think it's probably best not to do that. Anyway, thank you for the warm welcome, and thank you for the invitation from the Denton ISO for having me come down here. It's actually a real pleasure to be in Denton and to be here tonight. How many people are from Arab descent in the room? One. Mabruk. Which, Mabruk. Mabruk. Now, Mabruk is a word that I'll now translate, which is not to be confused with Mubarak. Mabruk means congratulations. Congratulations are in order. Mubarak, roughly translated, means shithead. Just you get the two things together, that's your first lesson in Arabic. Secondly, I want to start by using the opportunity to give my favorite, my joke that sustained me for years. Egyptian culture is full of good humor. I may not be typical, so if you're disappointed, blame somebody else, my parents, I don't know. But the joke that sustained me for years also has within it a kind of acceptance of the status quo, which most Egyptians, as most peoples in a whole series of regimes in the region, have come to the conclusion that there's really little you can do to change the system or to change the type of society that we lived under. The joke goes something like this, and you'll see why it has both immensely provocative evocations, but also a kind of acceptance of the status quo. The joke goes something like this. In 1952, Gamal Abdel Nasser, it's also a quick history lesson, Gamal Abdel Nasser came to power by means of a military coup, leading a group of people called free officers. They come to power. He consolidates, especially in 1954, but this is historically accurate, by the way, not just a joke. He consolidates his power, and after some years, decides that really, for those who are Godfather movie aficionados, that he needed a buffer. He needs some buffers. For those who haven't seen The Godfather, you ought to go see it. And by a buffer, somebody to absorb the blame for what he was doing. So after some years of consolidating power, Nasser decided to look around the country for somebody who wasn't really very talented, who wouldn't really challenge him, but would serve the role of a shock absorber, of being the person that could take blame for all the ills of the country. And he searched and searched the country through the 60s, and then finally came across Anwar Sadat. He was a member of the original Free Officers, incidentally, but it's completely irrelevant to the joke. Anwar Sadat follows Nasser after Nasser's death, comes into power, consolidates his power against various factions, and after a few years, Anwar Sadat decided, especially after the bread riots, the food riots of 1977, I need a buffer. I need a shock absorber. And he searched around the country for somebody less talented than him, for somebody a little duller than him, for somebody who really wouldn't pose a threat, and he searched and searched and searched. Finally, he found Hosni Mubarak. Mubarak comes to power after Sadat is assassinated in a flurry of bullets, for those who remember. But, by the way, Mubarak is standing right next to him. It's untouched. It's one of the mysteries of, firing 10,000 rounds of ammunition, how you don't hit everybody on the reviewing staff, just the guy who did it. But leaving that aside, Mubarak comes to power, and he decides after a period of time, you know what? No, he didn't say, that's what, it's okay. He says, I need a buffer. I need a shock absorber. I need somebody to blame. He looks around the country to find somebody just a little duller, just a little stupider, less ambitious than him, who won't threaten him. And Mubarak's been searching the country for that person ever since. And that was a joke which both typified the attitude towards the regime, but also a certain helplessness. That is to say, that the regime of Hosni Mubarak, like the regime of Ben Ali in Tunisia, had survived for years and years and years and years. What's happened in Tunisia and happened in Egypt is the opening dawn of a new period in the entire region. It began with an enormous upheaval in Tunisia with the self-immolation of an unemployed man who set himself on fire, and to bring attention to the state of unemployment, to the lack of democratic freedoms, to the lack of security, to the repressive state apparatus. in his country, in Tunisia, on December the 18th. And by December the 14th, after a series of bloody clashes and confrontations, and by the way, people need to, it's easy to see at the end of the events, oh, it was bound to win. It was not clear at all in those few weeks what the results of the struggle would be in Tunisia. But on December the 14th, after denying that there was anything wrong in his country, after then agreeing that there were maybe a few problems in the country, after trying to mow down protesters and being pushed back, after dissolving his cabinet, Ben Ali announced his decision to leave Tunisia. I happened to be in Cairo during that period of time, and I can tell you that the effect in Cairo and across the country, not just in Egypt, but across the whole Arab world, was electric. Because for the first time in years, a regime was overthrown, and a regime was not overthrown through the force of American or NATO arms, as in the case of Iraq, with the intervention against Saddam Hussein, but it was overthrown by the mass and popular mobilizations of tens of thousands of people. That's what's most important about what happened. It isn't simply the fact that the regime collapsed, or that the head of the regime was forced to resign. It's a little strong to say that the regime collapsed. I'll come back to that question. But that the head of a military state apparatus is forced to resign after using all the means at his disposal to stay in office was of enormous significance and spread, and is still spreading throughout the Middle East, if not throughout other areas of the world. This is not wishful thinking on my part. This is the reality of what took place and is still taking place in the region. To give you an example of the kind of shock effects, all you have to do is pick, you can pick any daily newspaper, but I saved this one for purposes like this meeting. Thursday, February the 24th, the Financial Times. The Financial Times is not generally known as a left-wing newspaper. People don't blame it for being a communist newspaper, but anyway, here on page 6, and sorry about the fiddling, page, I can't see anything without this. Sorry, it's page 5. Flat for a man who lies to you. Here on page 5, a little story, I would have said in the past, buried on page 5. They're hiding the fact that there was the 11th general strike in Greece against the government. Okay? That's on page 5. The 11th general strike against the government, austerity measures, economic policies, and the character of the country. But it's not just page 5, because you turn to page 4, and there's the story of the biggest set of strikes in India to have been seen in years and years. You go to page 1, there's a lovely man on the front page. That's meant to be sardonic. For the tape. He is the ruler of Saudi Arabia. He had just come back from 2 months abroad getting medical care, and lo and behold, he got back home and he found $36 billion of extra money. You know how that is. Look, dear, I found $36 billion. I didn't know you stashed it there. Yes, dear, I know. Let's give